All right, one last video here from Halloween. I have day 20, November 9th for you. This one, most of the day is going to be spent on students presenting their posters to the class. And there's a few different ways you can do this, so I'll try and talk through like the most straightforward one, but also there's a few possibilities that as I've been thinking through, like maybe that's how I would do it. So the first thing I would say is have get an order for who's going to present first, second, third, and for the first 6 people or so, about the first half of the people, bring them up to the computer, have them place their PowerPoint file on the desktop, or if it's online somewhere, have them open up the tab so that you can have smooth transitions from one person to the next without having to fumble. It's better to fumble here up front, which will also give groups a few minutes to gather their thoughts. Maybe write out some notes for what they want to say. The trick here is that this is a rehearsal. It is meant to play it out like it will appear when they're presenting their work in a live setting. So I don't want them summarizing what they're going to talk about. I want them to say what they think they will say, as close as they can figure out. So what this means is they should not look back at the screen as they're talking. Make sure they are standing a few feet in front of the screen so that they can't look back. They are going to be talking to a live audience with this, so they really have to start practicing it that way. You can't have a conversation where you're turning away. So expose them to that as much as you can this time. This is why they should probably write notes or have a printout, perfectly acceptable, that they can use as they're talking to somebody. They should go back and forth as a group, so that they're alternating who says what part of the explanation. They should talk for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I would keep a timer going. Let them know that you will stop them after 3 minutes. They shouldn't feel that they need to like present this word for word as a scripted talk, but they can if they're still at that stage. That's okay. But getting it more toward a natural conversation is where we're hoping to go. And then they should be prepared to answer some questions. You could ask questions at the end, ask them to re-explain why they chose this methodology, or so how do you see this conclusion being important to others, or just questions to get them to actually tease out the interesting bits. I think a fun alternative to this version, where they're presenting sort of on a stage and the audience is the audience, is to do it as a fishbowl activity, where it is the 2 presenters there in front of their poster and 1 other student, or maybe 2 other students, who are the audience, and they're there and they're actually receiving the presentation because they just walked by and they're curious about the poster, so they stopped, and they present it and they have a back and forth conversation. Each one of the listeners maybe has to ask 1 question or 2 questions, and everybody else around would then get to sort of watch the fishbowl as it happens, and it would be a bit closer to what's actually going to happen in the real event. Alternately, you could have Group A that just went first be in charge of asking questions to Group B, and then Group B has to ask questions to Group C, so there's a bit more agency, and folks will actually do it, whereas if you just say, and everybody ask a question, nobody will ask a question. So those are a few suggestions. I didn't even write down the timing on this one because I expect it to take pretty much the whole class. If you get through it and you have the time, let them sit down at their computers and actually put some of their ideas to use. designing, redesigning, planning their posters. If you can give them 5 minutes here, that's fine. If you can give them 15, 20, that's better, but it all depends how long that first activity takes. And that's the reason that I'd be in a lab, by the way, is for the work time. The final thing that I think you should probably do at this point is, well, two final things, is to go over Project 8 again. It's a good time to remind them that the research that they've started and that they have in this poster is not the end of the research. They can and should continue gathering data, continue thinking about how it works, continue thinking about how it will speak to an audience, because the next stage of this is an even more public audience, the whole world, and it is going to be within a website that people can navigate, can read things in more depth, read more text than will appear on a poster. It'll be 2 or 3 times as long in terms of words. Can't, of course, quantify visual design in that same way. But they'll be making their own WordPress site. Make sure that they understand how to do that. If they haven't done it before, you could sit down with them and do it right here. The process is laid out in your binder, but we've also done it a couple of times. So just draw their attention to that. They certainly don't need to be working on it for next class, but I want them to remember that what they're producing now isn't the end of the road. That this text is a draft of an idea, a project, a research that they are going to continue working on for another month, pretty much. They've not reached the end. So you should probably just go over the homework very quickly, which is not much. They should remember that the posters are going to be due after the next class, and that there's no Monday class because of Veterans Day. So the Wednesday evening next week is when their posters are going to be due. That gives them a good amount of time to keep working on them, which is the goal. I wanted to get through really showing off a couple of rough drafts so that they would have this long break period of time to process and develop and redraft and keep working on it. If we waited until it was mostly done for them to show it off, then they'd never make changes. But this really gives them the opportunity to rethink their ideas. Also, if any of them have done extension projects by this point, let them know that they should bring them in and be prepared to say a few words about them. Pretty informal, a few sentences about what they did and why they did it, but it's a nice spot to draw attention and also help those folks who are struggling to figure out how to finish this project that they signed up for, how they can actually do it. There's a limited window on when they can do it. It's only a couple more weeks before they have to have all of these turned in. So getting a little inspiration here, I think, could really do them some good. That's it. After this class, I hope you enjoy the break, the lack of a Monday class to teach. Of course, you've got grading to do if you still got grading to do. I hope all that's going all right from what I hear it is. The next week to come is to talk about WordPress stuff, to read some articles from the journal Kairos, which is an online journal for writing studies, and to start to plan what you want the web texts to look like.